A billionaire hires a street-hawking lady to play the role of a wife at a family meeting after his mother insists he must arrive married before his late father's property can be handed over to him. But will their secret be exposed? And if the family discovers the truth, what will happen to the hawking lady who dared to play the role of a wife? Hello, our dear viewers. Before the story begins, please don't forget to subscribe and like this video. Also, let us know in the comments which country you are watching from. James drove along the highway toward a very important family meeting. It was the meeting where the children of his late billionaire father would be told how the family properties would be shared. In James' family, this gathering was not just about wealth. It was about tradition. One rule stood above all others. Any son who came without a wife would receive nothing. As he drove, his thoughts were heavy. He had built his life around business growth. Long meetings, risky investments, and constant expansion. Marriage had never fit into his plans, not because he hated the idea, but because he believed he had time. Now time had run out. His phone rang. James glanced at the screen before answering. "Mom?" he said. Victoria's voice was calm but serious. "James, I trust you are on your way?" "Yes, I am," he replied. She paused briefly before asking the question he feared. "You are coming with your wife, correct?" James hesitated, then answered, "Yes, that's good," Victoria said. "The elders are already seated. You know how strict this tradition is. I don't want any shame today." "I understand," James replied. The call ended. James lowered the phone slowly. His heart raced. The lie felt heavy in his chest. He had no wife. He wasn't even close to marriage. His entire life had been consumed by business growth. And now that same ambition was threatening to cost him everything his father left behind. "What do I do now?" he muttered. He continued driving, his mind searching desperately for a solution. Then, ahead of him, he noticed a lady by the roadside speaking to drivers. She moved with focus, clearly trying to make a living. Something about the moment made James slow down. With no clear plan, James pulled over and called out to her, saying he wanted to buy something. Linda approached carefully, keeping her distance. "What do you want?" she asked. James looked through her items and pointed at one. "This one." She handed it to him, and he paid without argument. Linda nodded, ready to walk away. "Wait," James said. She turned back. "Is there a problem?" "No," he replied quickly. "I actually need to talk to you." Linda frowned. "About what?" James lowered his voice. "Something important." She stepped closer, still cautious. "Say it here." "I can't," James said. "Please get into the car. I won't keep you long." Linda shook her head. "I don't get into strangers' cars." "I understand," James said calmly. "If you don't like what I say, you can leave immediately." She studied his face for a moment, weighing his words, then sighed. "All right, but be quick." "All right," she said. "But don't waste my time." She got into the car but remained alert. "My name is James," he said. "Linda," she replied. James took a deep breath. "I'm heading to a family meeting. My father passed away, and today the family will decide how his properties are shared." Linda listened without interrupting. "There's a tradition in my family," James continued. "To receive anything, a man must attend with his wife. I told my mother I had one, but that wasn't true." Linda frowned. "So you lied?" "Yes," James admitted. "And now I'm trapped." She crossed her arms. "What does that have to do with me?" "I want you to pretend to be my wife for this meeting," James said. Linda stared at him in disbelief. "You must be joking." "I'm serious," he replied. She shook her head. "You're asking me to lie to your entire family." "I won't force you," James said quickly. "But I have no other option." Linda reached for the door. "Find someone else." James stopped her. "Please listen. This meeting decides my future." She paused but didn't turn back. "I don't even know you," she said. "That's true," James replied. "But I'll compensate you." She turned slowly. "Compensate?" "I'll give you $50,000, he said. Linda froze. "Say that again," she said quietly. $50,000, James repeated. She stared at him stunned. "You're serious?" "Yes." "For just one meeting?" she asked. "That's all." "And if your family discovers the truth?" "I'll take full responsibility," James said. "You won't suffer for it." Linda leaned back silent. Her thoughts raced. That amount of money could change her life. Still, fear held her back. After a long pause, she spoke. "I'll do it." James let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Thank you." Don't misunderstand, Linda added. I'm doing this for the agreement, nothing more. I respect that, James replied. They continued driving briefly before James spoke again. We need to prepare properly, he said. Prepare how? Linda asked. My family pays attention to details, James explained. I don't want anyone questioning you. They stopped at a boutique. James turned to her. Wait here. I'll handle this. Inside, James spoke confidently with the staff, explaining exactly what he needed. He was clear that nothing should be questioned and that everything would be settled immediately. Linda watched quietly as he made decisions without hesitation. When the selections were complete, James paid for everything at once. As they stepped back toward the car, Linda looked at him. You're really risking everything today, she said. Yes, James replied. But I have no choice. What happens after the meeting? She asked. We go our separate ways, he said. I won't pull you into anything beyond today. She nodded. Just remember, lies don't stay small for long. James gave a faint smile. I'm aware. Back in the car, James explained his family structure and how the meeting would go. If anyone speaks to you directly, stay calm, he said. I'll do most of the talking. Linda listened carefully. I can handle myself, she replied. As they drove toward the meeting, tension filled the car. James exhaled slowly. If this fails, I lose everything. Linda looked at him. Then act like a man who belongs there. James straightened. You're right. They continued driving toward the family meeting, both unaware that what began as a desperate lie was about to change their lives in ways neither of them expected. And the meeting had not even begun. James and Linda arrived at the large family compound together. And the moment James's mother, Victoria, noticed them, she stepped forward. Her expression softened as her eyes rested on Linda, studying her carefully from head to toe. My son's wife, Victoria said warmly, her voice carrying a sense of authority and pride. You are welcome. Thank you very much, Ma, Linda replied respectfully. Lowering her head slightly, Victoria reached out and gently held Linda's hands. Thank you for taking good care of my son. I can see that he looks settled. James stood quietly beside Linda, offering a small smile. Inside, he felt a wave of relief. The first test had gone better than he expected. Victoria turned fully toward Linda, her tone becoming lighter. I hope you are preparing my son's favorite food very well. He loves food too much. Linda smiled. Yes, Ma. I make sure he eats properly. Victoria's eyes sparkled with curiosity. So tell me, what is your husband's favorite food? Linda hesitated briefly, then answered with confidence. Spaghetti, Ma. Victoria laughed softly and shook her head. You don't really know him yet. As his mother, I know what he truly loves. Fried yam and fried egg have always been his favorite. For a moment, Linda's smile stiffened, but she quickly recovered. Oh yes, Ma. That was what he loved before. But now he has changed. These days he prefers spaghetti. James glanced at Linda, impressed by how quickly she adjusted. He nodded slightly, backing her up without saying a word. Victoria observed them closely for a moment, then smiled. People do change, she said calmly. Marriage has a way of doing that. James cleared his throat, sensing it was time to move on. Mom, where are my two senior brothers seated? I want to go and greet them. Victoria lifted her hand and pointed toward a distance. They are seated over there. Daniel is beside Michael. All right, James said. Victoria nodded. Go ahead. I'll catch up with you later. James turned toward Linda. Come with me. Linda nodded softly and followed him. Victoria stayed behind, watching them quietly as they walked away. Her expression thoughtful. After a few steps, James leaned closer to Linda and lowered his voice. You handled that better than I expected. Linda smiled slightly. I didn't have time to panic. James let out a slow breath. If you had paused even a second longer, my mother would have noticed. She's very observant, Linda replied. I could feel it. That's why this meeting worries me, James admitted. Linda glanced at him calmly. Then don't look worried. Confidence will carry us through. James looked at her with surprise. You're stronger than I thought. Linda smiled gently. Life doesn't give you a choice sometimes. They continued walking side by side. With every step, the weight of the lie pressed harder on James's chest. He straightened his shoulders, reminding himself what was at stake. Linda kept her face calm, though her mind was already preparing for what lay ahead. James slowed slightly and looked ahead. There they are, he said quietly. He turned toward Linda. Ready? Yes, she replied. James took a steady breath and stepped forward. Linda followed closely beside him as they walked toward his senior brothers. unaware of how fragile the lie truly was and how easily it could unravel. James and Linda approached the table, where his two senior brothers were, already seated. The moment Daniel noticed him, his face brightened. He stood up immediately, followed closely by Michael. "James!" Daniel exclaimed, stepping forward. He pulled James into a firm embrace. "You finally made it. We were beginning to wonder if you'd miss this." Michael laughed, gripping James by the shoulders once Daniel released him. "You kept us waiting, younger brother." "That's not like you." James smiled, the tension he had been carrying easing slightly. "I had to come properly. This meeting isn't something to rush." Daniel nodded approvingly, then his eyes shifted toward Linda, who stood calmly beside James. His expression softened with curiosity. "So," Daniel said slowly, "this is our wife you've been talking about." James placed a gentle hand near Linda, his posture confident. "Yes, this is Linda." Linda met their gaze and inclined her head respectfully. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you both." Michael studied her briefly, then smiled. "You're welcome. James has mentioned you more than once." He gestured toward the chairs around the table. "Please sit. Make yourselves comfortable." They all took their seats. The table felt like neutral ground. Yet beneath the calm surface, there was an unspoken awareness that every word mattered. This was family, but it was also tradition, legacy, and expectation intertwined. Daniel leaned back slightly, folding his arms as he looked at Linda again. "James speaks highly of you," he said, "especially about your work ethic." Linda smiled, measured and composed. "That's very kind of him to say." Michael nodded in agreement. "He told us you're planning to expand your business. Something about opening branches in other states." James glanced briefly at Linda, then returned his attention to his brothers. "That's not a small move," Michael continued. "I hope things are going well." Linda straightened slightly, her voice calm and steady. "It hasn't been easy, but progress has been consistent. Expansion requires patience. I believe growth should be intentional, not rushed." Daniel's lips curved into a thoughtful smile. "That's wisdom. Many people chase speed and forget stability." Michael added, "Ambition is useful, but discipline is what keeps it alive." Linda nodded. "Exactly. Without structure, growth becomes a liability." James released a quiet breath, the tension in his shoulders easing. "She's very focused," he said. "That's one of the things I admire about her." Daniel chuckled softly. "I can see that already. She speaks like someone who understands direction." Michael glanced at James with approval. "You did well for yourself." James smiled modestly. "I'm still learning." The conversation flowed easily for a while. Business, family expectations, subtle reflections on responsibility. Laughter surfaced occasionally, but beneath it all was careful observation. Linda felt it. This wasn't casual curiosity. She was being assessed. After a pause, James leaned back slightly and glanced around, as though just noticing something. "By the way," he said casually, "where are your wives? I thought I'd greet everyone together." Daniel exchanged a brief look with Michael before answering. "They were here earlier." Michael nodded and lifted his hand, pointing toward a direction away from the table. "One of the family members just called them. They needed help with something over there. They should be back soon," Daniel added. James nodded, accepting the explanation. "All right." Daniel leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. Family gatherings tend to pull everyone in different directions. Linda listened quietly, her expression calm. Every sentence carried weight, even the simplest ones. She understood now that this meeting wasn't only about inheritance. It was about belonging. Michael rested his hands flat on the table. "Still, it's good to see you settled." "James, stability matters, especially in this family." James met his gaze without hesitation. "I understand that." Daniel smiled faintly. "Then you're exactly where you should be." The conversation continued, light laughter mixing with thoughtful remarks. Linda responded when spoken to, choosing her words carefully. At other moments she remained silent, observing, learning, adapting. Everything appeared normal. Brothers reunited, conversations flowing, smiles exchanged. Yet beneath the surface lay traditions that could not be bent easily, expectations that demanded proof, and a fragile lie holding everything together. As they sat around the table, no one questioned what they saw. For now, appearances were enough. But how long that would last was a question none of them dared to ask aloud. The atmosphere in the hall shifted as casual conversations faded into silence. Chairs scraped softly as family members settled into their seats. This was no longer a gathering of relatives. It was the moment the family legacy would be formally placed into new hands. At the front stood an elevated table. The head of the family took his seat at the center, his presence commanding respect without effort. Two lawyers sat beside him, their documents arranged carefully. Several elders occupied seats close by, their eyes sharp and observant. One of the lawyers rose to his feet. "We will begin," he announced. The head of the family lifted his hand slightly. "Call the last son." A ripple of quiet surprise passed through the room. James felt his chest tighten. He was not expecting this. As the last-born, tradition usually placed him last, not first. He stood slowly, aware that every movement was being watched. Linda rose beside him, her expression calm despite the tension building between them. They walked forward together and stopped before the high table. The lawyer handed James a thick set of documents. "These are the properties assigned to you." James accepted them, nodding. The head of the family leaned forward slightly. "Your wife will swear first." Linda stepped ahead. "Call the full name of your husband's father," one of the elders instructed. For a brief moment, Linda froze. Her heart pounded. She had prepared for many things, but not this. She glanced instinctively at James. His face was tight with fear. If she hesitated now, everything would collapse. Her eyes shifted around the hall, and then she saw it. Behind the high table, a large banner displayed the image of the late patriarch. Beneath it, his name stood out clearly. Linda drew a breath and spoke, calling the name with confidence. The sound echoed through the hall. She continued, swearing to manage the properties responsibly, to expand them wisely, to ensure they generated income that would sustain their household and contribute to future family projects. As she spoke, murmurs of approval rippled through the elders. James felt his knees weaken with relief. He stepped forward next and took the oath himself, promising accountability, growth, and loyalty to the family legacy. The lawyer collected the signed documents and nodded. James and Linda stepped aside. "Call the second son," the lawyer announced. Michael stood with his wife and approached the table. Their process was smooth and confident. His wife swore without hesitation, naming the late father correctly and promising careful management. Michael followed with his own pledge. The documents were accepted. "Call the first son," the lawyer said. Daniel rose with his wife. They moved forward, composed and steady. The ritual repeated itself with precision. Oaths were taken. Promises were made. Papers were signed. When they returned to their seats, an elder rose slowly. "You have all done well," he said, his voice firm but measured. "What you receive today is not a reward but a responsibility." He paused, scanning the faces before him. "These properties must be protected and grown. In the years ahead, we will gather again to assess how well each of you has handled what was entrusted to you. Your actions will speak louder than today's words." The head of the family nodded in agreement. The meeting drew toward its end, but for James, the moment remained heavy. Standing beside Linda, inheritance secured and secret intact, he knew one truth clearly. Passing this test had only been the beginning. The meeting finally came to an end, and the tension that had filled the hall slowly dissolved. People began to rise from their seats, voices returning in low conversations. James let out a quiet breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He turned to Linda, his eyes filled with relief. "We did it," he said softly. Linda nodded. "Barely, but yes." Before leaving, James led Linda toward his brothers. Daniel noticed them first and smiled. "That went well," Daniel said. "You handled yourself properly, James." Michael nodded in agreement. "You surprised everyone today." James gave a small smile. "I had no choice." Daniel turned to Linda. "You were calm under pressure. Not everyone can stand in front of elders like that." "Thank you," Linda replied. "I just did what was required." Michael chuckled. "That's usually the hardest part." After a few more exchanged words, James inclined his head respectfully. "We should be going." Daniel patted his shoulder. "Travel safely." As James and Linda turned away, they nearly ran into Victoria. She stood there, her face glowing with pride. "My son, my wife," she said warmly, pulling James into a hug. "I'm so happy." Everything went exactly as it should. James held her briefly. "I'm glad you're pleased, Mom." Victoria then turned to Linda and held her hands. "Thank you for standing by my son. You carried yourself with dignity." "I did my best," Linda said respectfully. Victoria smiled. "Take good care of him. He forgets himself when he works too much." Linda nodded. "I will." Victoria lowered her voice slightly. "In a few months I'll come to your state to visit. I want to see how you're both settling in." "That would make us happy," James replied. Victoria hugged them both, holding on a moment longer than expected. "Go well. Make the family proud." James and Linda walked away together, side by side. Neither spoke as they made their way toward the car. The weight of the day lingered, but so did a strange sense of accomplishment. As they reached the vehicle, James glanced at Linda. "Thank you," he said quietly. Linda opened the door. "You're welcome." They got into the car and drove out of the premises, leaving the compound behind, along with a lie that had, for now, carried them safely through. James closed the car door and started the engine. As the vehicle moved onto the road, the silence between them felt heavier than before. The tension of the family gathering still lingered, mixed with relief and exhaustion. James kept his eyes on the road for a moment, then finally spoke. "Linda, thank you." She turned slightly toward him. "For what exactly?" "For everything," James replied. "Especially what you did in there. When they asked you to swear, I honestly thought that was it. I didn't believe you could handle it the way you did." Linda gave a small, tired smile. "Neither did I at first." James shook his head. "You didn't panic. You didn't hesitate for long. You saved me." "I just listened carefully and stayed alert," she said. "Sometimes that's all you can do." James glanced at her briefly, his tone softer. "You were brave. I owe you more than the money." Linda looked out of the window, saying nothing. After a short pause, James spoke again. "Can I ask you something?" She nodded. "Go ahead." "I want to know more about you," he said. "What's your story?" Linda inhaled slowly. "I was a student," she began. "I attended one of the well-known universities. I had plans, big ones." James listened closely. "My father died 6 years ago," she continued. "Everything changed after that. My mom tried to hold things together, but it wasn't easy. She worked non-stop, but school fees kept rising." James tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "I tried to help," Linda said. "I worked for people after classes. Sometimes I barely slept. But eventually my mom couldn't handle the fees anymore. I had to drop out." "That must have been hard," James said quietly. "It was," she replied. "But stopping school wasn't the worst part. I had younger siblings. Someone had to provide. So I started hawking." James shook his head slowly. "Just to survive?" "To survive," Linda said. "To eat, to help my mom, to keep my siblings in school." The car moved steadily as her words filled the space between them. "I didn't choose that life," she added. "But I chose not to give up." James felt a tightness in his chest. He had spent years chasing growth and profit, rarely thinking about struggles like hers. "I'm sorry," he said sincerely. "You've been carrying too much." Linda shrugged lightly. "Everyone carries something." James was silent for a moment, then spoke with quiet resolve. "You didn't deserve what happened to you." Linda looked at him, surprised. As they continued down the road, James felt something shift inside him. Not business, not strategy, but pity mixed with respect. For the first time, the woman beside him was no longer just a solution to a problem. She was someone whose strength he could not ignore. The car slowed as they reached the exact spot where James had first picked Linda up. He parked by the roadside and turned off the engine. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. The place felt ordinary, yet it carried the weight of everything that had happened that day. Linda was the first to break the silence. "This is where you stopped earlier." James nodded. "Yes." She turned toward him. "You promised the money." Without hesitation, James reached for his phone. "I'm transferring it now." A soft alert sounded a few seconds later. He angled the phone toward her. "It's done." Linda checked her phone. Her breath caught slightly as she saw the amount. She looked up at him, emotion flickering across her face. "You kept your word." "I told you I would," James said calmly. "This changes everything for me," Linda said quietly. "I can pay my school fees. I can take care of myself. I can support my mother." James nodded. "I'm glad it will help you stand again." She reached for the door handle. "Thank you, James." "Please," he said quickly, his voice stopping her. "Can I have just a minute?" Linda paused and slowly turned back to face him. "What is it now?" James took a breath. "I don't want you to return to the life you were living before. Not after today." Linda frowned slightly. "What do you mean by that?" "My family has seen you," James said. "They know you as my wife. If you go back to the streets, questions will come. And I don't want you exposed to that kind of struggle again." She studied his face, cautious. "So what are you suggesting?" "I want you to come with me," James said carefully. "Stay at my place for a while, not forever. Just until you're stable and ready for the next step." Linda shook her head immediately. "I don't want to be dependent on you." "That's not what this is," James replied. "You'll have your independence, your plans. I'm just offering you a safer space." She looked away, thinking. The silence stretched between them. After a moment, Linda spoke softly. If I agree, there's something you need to understand. James nodded. Go on. My mother must know about my movement, she said firmly. I won't leave without informing her. James answered without hesitation. That's completely fine. I respect that. Linda held her phone tightly in her hand, weighing her options. Finally, she let out a slow breath. All right, she said. I'll come with you. James looked at her, surprised and relieved. Are you sure? Yes, she replied. But only for a while. That's enough, James said. She closed the door properly and fastened her seatbelt. James started the engine, and the car eased back onto the road. As they drove away, Linda watched the surroundings pass by, knowing she was leaving behind a chapter of her life she never imagined she would escape so suddenly. James kept his eyes on the road. Thank you for trusting me, Linda answered quietly. I'm trusting the chance to do better. The road stretched ahead of them, silent and open. What began as an act of desperation had turned into a fragile agreement, one that carried hope, risk, and the promise of a future neither of them had planned, yet both were now stepping into together. The car rolled to a smooth stop in front of a towering building. Linda stepped out slowly, her eyes lifting as she took in the structure before her. The place looked untouched, polished, and overwhelming. Light reflected off glass and carefully arranged designs, making everything shimmer as though the house itself was alive. As they walked inside, Linda's steps slowed. The interior opened into a vast sitting room filled with expensive furniture, neatly arranged decor, and shining surfaces that caught the light from every angle. Everything looked carefully chosen, perfectly placed. She turned to James, her voice low and full of wonder. This is your house? James nodded lightly. Yes, this is where I live. She looked around again, disbelief written clearly on her face. You live here alone? He gave a small, almost tired smile. Alone. Most of the time it feels too quiet. Too empty. A place this big shouldn't feel that lonely, but it does. Linda studied him for a moment, then spoke gently. You're a full-grown man. Why haven't you married? You should have a wife, children, laughter in this house. Yet you chose to stay alone. James leaned against a chair, choosing his words carefully. It's not that I don't want marriage. I've tried, more than once, but every relationship I entered ended the same way. I realized they weren't in love with me. They were in love with what I had. My money, my status. He paused, his voice steady but heavy. After a while I stopped trying. I decided to focus on my business instead. Linda looked at him quietly, her expression softening. She didn't interrupt. She simply listened. After a moment she spoke. I need to inform my mother about my movement. She'll be worried if she doesn't hear from me. James nodded. Of course. Take your time. Linda stepped aside and dialed a number. When the call connected, her voice warmed instantly. Mama! Her mother's voice came through, calm but alert. Linda, where are you? You didn't come home. I'm fine, Mama, Linda replied. Something came up. I'll be staying away for a few days. There was a brief pause. Are you safe? Yes, Mama. Everything is okay. I promise. When I come back, I'll explain everything properly. Her mother sighed softly. All right. Just make sure you're careful. I will, Linda said reassuringly. Don't worry. They exchanged a few more words before Linda ended the call. She returned to James, who had respectfully given her space. Thank you for understanding, she said. James gestured toward a wide hallway. Come, I'll show you where you'll sleep tonight. They walked together down the hallway lined with doors. Linda slowed her steps, suddenly uneasy. She stopped and looked at him, her voice trembling slightly. James, please tell me I'm safe here. I don't want a situation where someone later tells my mother that I went missing, or that something bad happened to me. James faced her fully, his tone firm and sincere. You're safe. Nothing will happen to you here. I promise you that. Her shoulders relaxed just a little. He opened a door and showed her a neatly prepared room. This is yours. You can rest here. A little later, James returned with a tray of food and handed it to her. You must be hungry. Thank you, Linda said softly. He stepped back. If you need anything, just let me know. As James walked away to his own room, his mind wandered. He lay back on his bed, staring at the ceiling. He never imagined his life would take such a turn. Meeting Linda had disrupted the quiet routine he had grown used to. Across the hallway, Linda sat on the bed, holding the tray untouched for a moment. She looked around the room, overwhelmed by the sudden change in her life. In separate rooms, under the same roof, both of them lay awake, each thinking about how unexpectedly their paths had crossed, and how this single decision might change everything that lay ahead. The second day started in uneasy silence, the house resting in a fragile calm. James had just stepped out of his room when a loud, careless voice broke the peace. It was Sophia, his former lover, a woman from his past whose life was ruled by recklessness, drinking, and chaos. Someone he had walked away from long ago but who refused to let go. "Ya, miss." The voice echoed from the sitting room. "Come out. Your love is here. Your sweetheart is here." The words were slurred, careless, and loud. A bottle hit the table with a dull sound. James froze for a second, instantly recognizing the voice. His expression hardened. He rushed down the hallway and into the sitting room. Sophia stood in the middle of the room, swaying on her feet. Her hair was disordered, her eyes unfocused, a half-filled bottle clenched in her hand. She laughed loudly, staggering as though the ground itself was moving. James stared at her in disbelief. "Sophia, what are you doing here?" She spread her arms dramatically. "I came to see my man." "Is that a crime?" James' voice dropped, sharp with frustration. "How many times have I told you I don't want to see you here again? Especially not like this. Look at yourself. Early morning and you're already drunk." Sophia scoffed and took another careless step forward. "So now you're judging me?" James shook his head slowly. "Instead of getting a job and taking your life seriously, this is what you choose. I feel pity for you, Sophia. Deep pity." At that moment, soft footsteps sounded behind him. "James, what's happening?" Linda stepped into the sitting room, confusion written across her face. She stopped when she saw the scene before her. Sophia's eyes landed on Linda instantly. Her expression twisted. "Oh!" she shouted, pointing. "So this is it. You brought another woman into this house?" She laughed loudly, the sound sharp and unstable. "James, you're cheating on me? Is this how you planned our love story?" James turned toward her slowly, disbelief flashing across his face. "What love are you talking about? Whose love? I am not in love with you, Sophia. I never was." Sophia staggered closer, her voice rising. "I pity you, James. You betrayed me, the queen." James stepped forward, his tone firm and unshaken. "I can never marry someone irresponsible. Never." Sophia gasped, then laughed again. "So now I'm irresponsible because of this little thing?" She pointed at the bottle, then suddenly turned her finger toward Linda. "Or is it because of this dirty girl standing there?" Linda stood frozen, shock and hurt flashing across her face. Sophia moved suddenly toward Linda, her arm lifting as though to strike. Before she could get close, James stepped between them and grabbed Sophia's wrist mid-air. "Don't try it," he said sharply. "Do you hear me? Don't you dare try it." Sophia struggled slightly, laughing weakly. "You're protecting her now?" James released her hand and pointed firmly toward the door. "Get out of my house. I don't want to see you here again. The next time you step into this place, I will call the police. Do you hear me? Get out, now." For a moment, Sophia stared at him, then burst into laughter again. "So you're leaving me for a dirty girl?" She mocked loudly, shaking her head. "James left me for a dirty girl." Still laughing, she staggered toward the exit, nearly losing her balance. She paused at the doorway, turned back once more and scoffed. "You'll regret this," she muttered, though her words carried no strength. She stumbled outside, climbed into her car with the bottle still in hand, and drove off recklessly, her laughter fading into the distance. The house slowly returned to silence after the chaos. James stood near the center of the sitting room, his shoulders tense, as though the echoes of Sophia's voice still lingered in the air. Linda remained a few steps behind him, unsure whether to speak or wait. The calm felt fragile, like it could break at any moment. James turned toward her, his face filled with regret. "Please." "I'm truly sorry you had to experience that," he said. "That was never meant to happen, especially not in front of you." Linda studied him carefully. She could see the embarrassment in his eyes, mixed with something deeper, exhaustion. "Sophia and I ended things a long time ago," James continued. "Not because of pride or anger, but because of values. She refuses to grow. You saw it clearly today. Despite coming from a wealthy family, she doesn't respect discipline or responsibility. I can't build a life with someone who treats everything like a joke." Linda nodded slowly. "I understand. When I first saw her, I was frightened. I thought she might harm me. But once she left, I realized it was more noise than danger." James released a long breath. "I hate that you were pulled into my past." "It's fine," Linda said gently. "Life sometimes reveals people's stories in unexpected ways." A quiet moment followed before Linda spoke again. "I need to go see my mother today. I must explain everything to her. She'll be worried if I don't." James' expression shifted immediately. "Let me come with you." Linda shook her head softly. "Not today. I need to talk to her alone." James hesitated, then stepped closer. "You won't disappear, will you?" he asked carefully. "Please don't misunderstand me. I don't want to lose you." Linda met his gaze firmly. "I won't run away. I promise you. I'll return before evening." James nodded, though uncertainty still clouded his thoughts. "Please keep your word." Linda walked into the room she had slept in and packed her bag quietly. When she returned, James followed her outside. He stood by the doorway, watching her walk away, his chest tightening with every step she took farther from him. Though her promise echoed in his mind, doubt whispered that she might choose not to return. Linda stopped in front of a modest rented room, its walls worn by time and struggle. She paused briefly, steadying herself before knocking. The door opened slowly, revealing her mother, Mrs. Grace, whose eyes widened in surprise. "Linda, what brings you here this early?" her mother asked. Linda stepped inside, taking in the familiar space that held memories of sacrifice and survival. They sat together on a small couch, and Linda clasped her hands tightly. "Mama," she began softly, "I need to explain something important." Mrs. Grace listened as Linda carefully told her story, from how she had been picked up from the roadside, to how that moment led to a family meeting, and eventually to staying at James' house. She spoke calmly, but her voice trembled slightly. Her mother's face grew pale. "You followed a stranger? Linda, do you know how dangerous that sounds? What if he was part of bad people?" "No, Mama," Linda said quickly. "He's not like that. He's serious, responsible, and focused. Everything about him shows discipline. His life revolves around work and structure." Mrs. Grace shook her head anxiously. "People can pretend, my daughter, especially rich people." "I know," Linda replied. "But I've watched his actions, not just his words. He respects boundaries. He values responsibility." Her mother sighed deeply. "I'm scared. But maybe God sent him to help us. Still, be careful. I'll be calling you often." Linda nodded. "Please do." As evening approached, Linda stood up, hugged her mother tightly, and handed her some cash. "Use this for now. I'll come back soon." Mrs. Grace's eyes filled with tears. "Goodbye, my daughter. I'll visit you soon." Linda walked away slowly, glancing back once more. Her mother waved, watching until Linda disappeared down the road, hope and fear battling in her heart. As days passed, James found himself thinking about Linda more than he expected. What started as desperation slowly felt meaningful. He admired her calm strength and dignity. Yet one thing held him back: trust. Past betrayals haunted him, so that night, he called the person he trusted most, his mother. The phone rang once, then twice. "James," Victoria said when she answered. "I was expecting your call." He swallowed. "Mom, I need to talk to you." "I'm listening," she replied calmly. James hesitated, then spoke carefully. "You know that lady I introduced to you as my wife? She was not my wife." There was a sharp pause on the other end of the line. "What do you mean?" Victoria asked, her voice suddenly alert. "She wasn't my wife before that meeting," James continued. "I met her on the roadside that same day you called me. When you asked if I was coming with my wife, I panicked. I had no option." Victoria let out a slow breath. "James, do you understand what you're saying?" "I do," he replied. I explained everything to her. I told her the truth, and she agreed to help me attend the meeting. Victoria was silent for a moment, clearly processing his words. "So the woman who stood before the elders was a stranger?" "Yes," James said softly. "But that's the part that troubles me. She behaved perfectly. No mistakes, no suspicion, nothing gave her away." Victoria sighed. "I must admit I never suspected a thing. She carried herself like someone raised within discipline." "That's why I'm confused," James said. "She doesn't act like someone with hidden intentions. Yet I don't want to rush my heart again." Victoria's tone shifted from surprise to caution. "You cannot judge her too quickly. Some people are genuine, but others are patient." "I'm beginning to see a future with her," James admitted. "But I'm not ready to fully trust yet." Victoria paused, then spoke decisively. "Then she must be tested." James straightened. "Tested?" "Yes," she said. "If you're considering marriage, we must be sure. There are 3 stages." James listened closely. "The first test," Victoria explained, "is money. A large amount. Enough to tempt her. We must see if she steals it or remains honest." James frowned. "That sounds harsh." "Life is harsher," Victoria replied. "The second test is temptation. A man will approach her. If she cheats, you'll know where her heart truly lies." James felt uneasy but stayed quiet. "The third," Victoria continued, "is loyalty under pressure. Another opportunity involving money, one that forces her to choose between betrayal and commitment. James exhaled slowly. And if she fails? Then you walk away, Victoria said firmly. No emotions, no regrets. And if she passes? Victoria's voice softened. Then you found a rare woman. James leaned back, the weight of the conversation settling on him. He didn't like the idea of putting Linda through such trials, yet he understood the reason. Love without trust could destroy everything he had built. I'll think about it, he said quietly. You must act wisely, Victoria replied. This family does not survive on emotions alone. The call ended, but James remained still, staring into space. His mind replayed Linda's words, her calm confidence, her sincerity. Deep inside, he hoped she would pass every test, not just for his family, but for his heart. Finally, he stood up, determination settling in his chest. If this is the only way to be sure, he murmured, then I agree with my mom plans. And with that thought, James made his decision. James moved with careful purpose, reminding himself the plan was not to trap Linda, but to understand her true character, knowing that love without trust, honesty, and clarity could silently destroy a future before it truly begins. One quiet afternoon, while Linda was out running errands, James stood alone in the hallway outside her room. In his hand was a small travel bag, plain, unremarkable, the kind no one would look at twice. Inside it, however, was a massive sum of cash, $200,000, neatly stacked and secured. He opened the door slowly, stepped inside, and glanced around as if the room itself might judge him. Moving to her wardrobe, he pushed aside some clothes and placed the bag deep at the back, making sure it wasn't easily visible. He closed the wardrobe and stood still for a moment, his heart beating faster than he expected. This is the first test, he told himself. If she's honest, she'll do the right thing even when no one is watching. The following morning, Linda stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her outfit as she prepared for the day. Her mind was on her plans, her work, and the breakfast conversation she and James had shared earlier. Reaching into the wardrobe to grab a jacket, her hand touched something that didn't feel like fabric. She frowned and pulled it forward. The moment she saw the bundles of cash, her breath caught. What? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Her heart raced as she stared at the money, disbelief washing over her face. She carefully checked again, as if expecting it to disappear. It didn't. Her hands trembled, not with excitement, but with shock. How did this get here? She muttered. For a brief moment she stood still, thinking. Anyone else might have sat down, calculated possibilities, imagined solutions. Linda didn't. Instead, she carefully wrapped the money back exactly as she had found it, closed the wardrobe, and picked it up with both hands. She walked straight to James's room. James was seated when she knocked, scrolling through his phone. He looked up, surprised to see her standing there with a serious expression. Linda? He asked. She stepped inside and gently placed the bundle on the table between them. James, I found this in my wardrobe, she said, her tone calm but firm. I don't know how it got there, but I didn't want to keep quiet about it. James leaned forward slowly, his eyes fixed on her face. You found all this, and you came directly to me. Yes, she replied without hesitation. I was scared someone might think I took it if I didn't speak up. This kind of money can ruin lives. He lifted the bundle, pretending to inspect it, though his attention never left her. I must have left it there by mistake, he said carefully. I was sorting some things and forgot. Linda exhaled softly, relief flickering across her face. Please be more careful next time. That's not something you forget easily. James nodded. You're right. Thank you for bringing it to me. She gave a small nod and turned to leave, unaware of the storm of thoughts inside his mind. When the door closed behind her, James sank back into his chair. His chest tightened, not with suspicion, but with something close to admiration. She didn't hesitate. Not even for a second, he thought. That wasn't fear. That was honesty. Still, he remembered his mother's voice clearly. One test was never enough to define a person's heart. That evening, James stood by the window, staring at the city below. His reflection stared back at him, thoughtful and conflicted. You passed the first stage, he murmured under his breath. But trust is built layer by layer. He picked up his phone, scrolling through contacts, already considering how the next test would unfold. The second test would challenge loyalty. The third would challenge commitment. As the room grew quiet, James made his decision. Whatever came next, he would see it through. The second test took place at Linda's workplace, the job James helped her get. A man was sent to get close to her. He kept talking to her, asking her to leave James and start a relationship with him. He even offered her money. Linda refused every time. She told him clearly that she loved James and would never betray him. She did not hide anything or feel confused. Her decision was firm. From afar, James saw everything. He realized her loyalty was real, not forced. The second test ended quietly, but it spoke loudly about her character. The third test came quietly, without warning, and it carried the greatest weight. Linda was surprised when Victoria asked to see her privately. They met in a calm sitting room, away from noise and distractions. Victoria's face was serious, her posture firm. Linda greeted her politely, unaware that this moment would decide her future. Victoria did not waste time. She placed a small case on the table between them and pushed it forward slightly. "Linda," she said evenly, "James is in charge of a family property worth millions. That responsibility should not stay with him." Linda looked confused. "I don't understand, Ma." Victoria opened the case just enough for Linda to see the cash inside. $500,000, she said. "Help me remove James from the picture. Walk away clean, rich, and free." Linda stood up immediately, shock spreading across her face. "Remove James? You want me to harm your own son?" Victoria leaned back. "This is business. People make hard choices every day." Linda's voice shook, not from fear, but anger. "No, I will never do that. James trusts me. I love him. I won't destroy him for money." Victoria's eyes stayed on her. "Think carefully. This can change your life." Linda pushed the case back firmly. "My life means nothing if it's built on betrayal. How can a mother plan evil against her own son?" Her voice rose as emotion took over. "Please stop this. Don't ever bring this kind of thing to me again." For a moment the room was silent. Then a door behind them opened. James stepped out slowly. His face was calm, but his eyes were full. Linda turned and froze when she saw him. "James," she whispered. Victoria stood up and sighed softly. "It's enough." Linda's hands trembled. "You heard everything?" James nodded. "Every word." Linda's breath broke. "I didn't know. I didn't know this was a test." Victoria's expression changed. The hardness left her face. "Because I didn't want to do this," she said gently. "But I needed to be sure." Linda's eyes filled with tears. "So all the pain, the pressure, the confusion, it was all testing me?" "Yes," Victoria replied. Linda broke down, overwhelmed. "I kept asking myself what I did wrong." James moved closer and held her. "You did nothing wrong," he said softly. "You did everything right." Linda cried openly now, relief and emotion pouring out at once. Victoria smiled for the first time. "You passed every stage. Money couldn't move you. Temptation couldn't shake you. Betrayal disgusted you." She took Linda's hands. "You are truthful. You are strong. You are worthy to be my son's wife." Linda nodded through tears. "Thank you, Ma." Victoria chuckled lightly. "Now dry those tears. Go and prepare for your wedding. In a few months it must take place." Linda smiled, tears still shining in her eyes. "Yes, Ma?" James laughed softly. "No problem, Mom. We'll be ready." Victoria turned toward the door, satisfied. "Then my work here is done." As she left the room, James held Linda closer. "The tests are over," he said. "What remains is our future." Linda smiled against his chest, finally at peace. Hand in hand they walked forward together, knowing every test was over and their future would be built on trust, love, and a promise that would soon become forever. After a few months passed by, James and Linda's lives began to settle into a joyful rhythm. Their wedding had been a beautiful celebration, filled with laughter, blessings, and love from family and friends. Victoria watched her son with pride, finally seeing him with a partner of integrity and character, someone who truly cared for him. His two brothers joined in the celebration, happy for James's happiness, and the start of a strong, loving marriage. Every day James and Linda grew closer, supporting each other in both personal and family matters. Their bond deepening with trust, love, and respect. True love thrives on trust, integrity, and patience. Rushing judgment or testing character harshly can be risky, but honesty and loyalty are always rewarded in the end. Thank you for listening. Every story carries a lesson, a secret, and a moment that lingers. Subscribe, like, and stay with us, because the next story may reveal a truth you never expected.